In this video, I'm going to cover with you 3 property strategies. The first one is rent to rent, and this is a good one, by the way, especially if you haven't got the capital to get started. The second one is new builds. This is a good one because it helps you scale up and it's really good margins, and you can become a property developer and have your own construction company if you've got the appetite to do so. And the third one is lease option agreements. So watch the video, share your comments, click like, click subscribe, and ask as many questions as you like. This is video 4 in a compilation of videos on property strategies. Now there's a lot of strategies out there, but I'm only covering the main ones for you. So in video 1, I covered buy to let, because that's where most people usually start. In video 2, you've got HMOs, service accommodation, and BRRR. And in video 3, you've got commercial conversions, flips, and JVs. Now if you're aware of these strategies, or if you want to learn more about them, or you haven't heard of them, click the link up here and you can watch all 3 videos and get used to or understand these different strategies. Today I'm going to cover for you 3 additional strategies, and they are rent to rent, new builds, and lease options. And I'm going to introduce you to each 3 of them so you'll have a better understanding. And I think it's important you don't focus on one particular strategy, because you'll know from experience having all your eggs in one basket isn't a good idea. So to have 2 or 3 strategies usually is good, and most people, generally speaking, have one main strategy where they focus 70% of their time on, a second one where they focus 20% of their time, and a third one 10% of their time. Now you don't have to be that stringent in terms of 70 20 10, by the way. You could do 50 30 20, 50 25 25, or whatever works for you, but having more than one strategy is a very good idea. Now let's start with the first one for today, which is rent to rent. Now most people think they need a lot of cash in order to get started in property, because they think they need a deposit, they need to pay for legal fees, mortgage, arrangement, valuation, stamp duty, land tax, although the arrangement fees can be added to the loan, but they think they need a big chunk of cash to get started. And that's true if you're buying your own properties, okay, but there's a concept out there which is using other people's assets, and that's where rent to rent comes in. So you find somebody who has a property who they either can't rent out, or they like you and they want you to look after that property for them, and they give it to you and you rent it for them. The fantastic thing from your point of view is you don't need to buy the property. So the assets there, you agree a deal with them where you pay them a fixed amount of rent every single month, and then you rent it out to somebody else. Hence why it's called rent to rent. So you're renting an asset both from the owner, but you're renting it to an occupier as well. What you need to do is make sure there's a margin for you in terms of the rent you're receiving in and the rent you're paying out, because the last thing you want to do is agree a fixed rent you're paying to the landlord or the owner and then not have enough income coming in where you're making a loss every single month. That's a bad place to be. So make sure you understand the margins and make sure there's a margin of error there for you in terms of the rent coming in and the rent going out. And the way to make it work usually is you'll have a fixed term agreement or a short term lease with the owner where you pay them a certain amount of rent every single month based on the size of the house and the market value. You'll then rent it out as single rooms or as a HMO, so you'll charge rent per room. So you could, let's say, be paying the landlord £1,000 a month, and let's say it's got 4 rooms in a house, and you could be renting each room out for, say, £450 a month. And so if you've got 4 rooms, you're making between £1,600 to £1,800. You've got an £800 margin there to pay for all the other costs and of course for your profit. So that's how it usually works, but make sure you know the numbers, because once you've signed a lease agreement, you've made a commitment, you're going to have to stick to it unless there's a break clause there. So do not enter into this without understanding the entire obligations, responsibilities and liabilities. Now you might be thinking, why would a landlord want to give me a property on a fixed term basis? Generally speaking, maybe they've had bad experience with tenants, maybe they've had bad experience with letting agents, maybe the property is not been in very good condition, maybe they just don't want all that hassle, and there's been lots of voids, so they're saying I just want to give to one person who's going to give me fixed rent over a fixed period of time, and that's all what I want. Now that's not going to work for everybody, because some people may want to manage it themselves, or they don't mind the additional headache that comes with it. But there are people out there who just want to get rent and they want passive income and they don't want the hassle with it, and that's where you come in. That's where you can make your margin. The benefit for you, of course, is you can get into the world of property investing without using much or any of your cash, and of course you can get started very, very quickly if you find the right opportunities. And it's a fantastic way to scale, because if you think about it, let's say you're buying a buy-to-let property, and let's say the value of the property is £100,000 and you've got to put down a 25% deposit because the loan to value is 75%. Well, how many £25,000 have you got? Depends obviously on your income and your ability to raise the capital. With rent to rent, you don't need that £25,000. You'll need a smaller sum based on how much work the property may need. So you can scale up very, very quickly. Within a year, you can have 10, 15, 20 rent to rent properties quite easily. And if you look at the margins I talked about earlier, if you're making £800 margin per property per month before all of the costs, let's say the net margin for you is £400 per property times 12 gives you 4,800, and if you've got 10 properties, that's £48,000. You can do the math and work out, if you're adding 10 properties every single year over 5 years, you're going to make a huge amount of profit, or a decent amount of profit at least anyway, and you'll have happy landlords who are getting their rent on time. You'll have happy tenants who've got their rooms and you're looking after them, and in between as the intermediary, you'll be happy because everything's working just fine. The things that you need to be aware of course, is it's not your property, so you don't get the capital growth. As you get busier, you'll need to employ people who can help you manage the business. I know some people out there who just want to work on their own. So if employing people isn't the thing for you, then either you'll have a small rent-to-rent business, or this might not be the right strategy for you. And the third one is, not everybody is up for rent-to-rent in terms of the owner or the landlord. So you need to make sure you're talking to lots of people, because there's only a small pool of people who are interested in rent-to-rent. So you need to go out there and find them and do those deals. Number 2 is new builds, and one of my favorite strategies. And you may or may not know, right now we're building 49 houses in Bicker in Boston. If you haven't seen those videos, click this link here and you'll see an update of exactly where we are and what we're going through. Now, how this generally speaking works, there's quite a few different variations. I'm not going to cover all of them for you, but the options are, you either buy a piece of land without planning, so there's a great deal of speculation involved there, or you buy a piece of land with outline planning and then take it through reserved matters and detailed planning. Or the third one is, you find a landowner who either has planning or doesn't have planning, and you enter into an option agreement or a JV agreement with them, so you use their land and your expertise to build it out. Now, if you're buying land without planning, it is risky, and that's why it's highly speculative. You need to make sure you do all your research, have a good planning consultant, speak to the local authority, and go into this whole venture with your eyes open. This is where I see people making a lot of mistakes. So if you're new to it, I would recommend you probably don't go down that particular avenue, especially buying the land. Having an option agreement, possibly, but even if you have an option agreement, if you're going through planning, it might cost you anywhere from, say, 30,000 upwards, and 30,000 is a low figure, by the way, depending on the size of the land. And if you've spent all that money and planning doesn't go through, you're obviously going to not be a very happy person. So bear that in mind. If you buy land without land planning, so you'll have to pay a bit more for it than you would do if you just bought it as land without planning, but at least you've got the confidence that through the reserved matters process, you are going to get full detailed planning. And the third option obviously is doing it with the landowner, and that you kind of share the risk, but at least there's no initial outlay of capital. You might have to pay for the planning, or you can get them to pay half for the planning, you pay half for the planning, and that would work well. Once you've done that, you then also need to make sure you work out the numbers. So you need to do a detailed appraisal with a quantity surveyor, working out exactly how much it's going to cost you. So right now, everything's going up in price, and certain materials and items are very hard to get hold of. Bricks, concrete, timber frame, roof tiles, many other things. You've got to order in bulk, and you've got to order well in advance. So make sure you do the numbers, because if you get the numbers wrong, it's going to cost you a lot of money and you might end up making a loss. Alongside that, of course, you then got to work out the GDV and the end price. So talk to some local agents, do your own research, and make sure that the market value figures tie up. Now, alongside that, you've got to do ground reports, site inspection, lots of other things to make sure you know exactly the state of the land and how much work is required. Because the last thing you want to do is buy a piece of land, you've got the outline planning, you've got detailed planning, and then you haven't done a site report or an inspection, and you find out, well, it needs piling, and piling is going to cost you £250,000, and based on your numbers, you're going to make a £300,000 profit. But if 250 goes going to piling, you've only got 50 grand left. And as the project progresses, what you're going to find out is there's other costs that you probably hadn't thought of, or the project takes longer, therefore it costs you more money, therefore there's no profit in it. So you've got to make sure you do the due diligence well up front in advance. And if you haven't done this before, don't go and try and build 25 houses. I'd say start off small, build 2 or 3 houses, get used to the process, get used to having contractors or builders, subcontractors working for you, and as you get experience, then go on to the bigger projects. Then you need to think about, do I want to sell all the houses, or do I want to keep all of them, or do I want to do a bit of both? And there's some different tax consequences for that, so you need to be aware of that, because keeping the houses as investment, selling them will be trading, and if you mix the two, you may have to pay some tax in terms of a dry tax charge. But what you can also, of course, do is sell all the houses to a local housing association. So you might want to enter into a contract with them where you give them the end product, and that could work well for you. They'll obviously buy the whole lot from you, or you could speak to a portfolio landlord, and they might buy all the houses from you, or you might speak to 2 or 3 portfolio landlords, and they might take a certain chunk of the development from you. You also need to obviously bear in mind the Section 106 costs, and also, of course, the affordable housing element. And if you've got the outline planning in place, then those numbers will be there. If you haven't, then you'll need to enter into a negotiation with a local authority. This is a very involved strategy. It's going to take time, expertise. You'll need experts on board. So for this particular strategy, go into it with your eyes open, because this is a fantastic strategy. It works incredibly well, but a lot of people who don't know property well enough or aren't experienced can tend to lose a lot of money. So it's one of my most favorite strategies, hence why we're building 49 houses in Bicca, but it is involved. So if you're really new to property, I'd say probably don't start with new builds, start with buy-to-lets or deal sourcing or rent-to-rent or something else, and get used to everything in terms of working in the property sector before you go into new builds. And our final one now, which is lease options, which is basically a lease with an option to purchase. Here what you do is you find somebody who is open to selling their house, and you may not have the ability to buy it right now, or they might not want to sell it right now. So you enter into a lease, let's just call it a 5-year lease for now. So you lease it from them for 5 years, and at the end of that lease period, you have an option to buy the property. Now, it doesn't have to be at the end, by the way. You can have an open-ended option. When I say open-ended, I mean open-ended in terms of the term of the lease. So at any point within that lease, you have the option to buy the property. Now, you can carve this up in a different way. Sometimes what people do is say, we'll pay you a monthly amount, and that monthly amount will get deducted from the end sales price. Other people pay a monthly amount, and you pay that as rent with the option to obviously buy the property at the end. So what they're really doing is it's a hybrid of a rent to rent. So they're paying a fixed rent amount, turning into an HMO, for example, renting it out individually as rooms for a number of years, and at the end of that period, or at any point during that period, they then end up buying the property from the landlord at a fixed price. I mean, you could do it at a market price, but usually it's better to fix the price up front. Now, you might be thinking, why would a landlord want to do this? But some people have got a property, they're fed up of it, they can't sell it, therefore they just want to do a deal on it. Other people can't keep up the mortgage repayments, they're struggling, they're behind, they're in default, so they're just thinking, I'd rather somebody takes over, pays me a fixed amount every single month, that covers my mortgage, and at some point in the future they want to buy the property, they'll take it off my hands, it works fine. There could be two parties who are going through a divorce, they just want to get this property out of the estate, and so they can move on. They might be all open to doing lease option agreements, and there are other variations of and reasons why somebody would want to do a lease option. Why it's good for you, of course, is it gets you into the property, creates some cash flow for you if you're doing the rent-to-rent model, and then it gives you enough time to be able to source the capital to buy the property at some point in the future. And depending on how you do the deal, if you're paying monthly and that's going to reduce the overall end price for you, then of course you can save up every single month in terms of the rent that comes in. And at the end, when you buy the property, let's say you agree to buy it for 150 grand, and if you pay £10,000 off every single year for the first 5 years, then in year 5 you only need to find another £100,000 to buy the property, and of course that could be by way of mortgage. So it's a good way for you to get onto the property ladder. It's a good way for you to help people who've got major problems. Usually the people who enter into lease options, they've got some kind of a situation, circumstance, problem, issue, challenge, so they're willing to just do a deal to get out of that particular property. So you need to find those people, and this isn't going to work for everybody, but you need to find people who have those problems and then obviously get to them with a solution. And the lease option needs to be drawn up properly, so you need a good solicitor, commercial solicitor, who knows about land, property and lease option agreements, so that it is watertight, so it protects you and it's very clear to the seller exactly how things are going to work. And like I said, you'll have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find a prince. So not everybody is up for this strategy, but there are people out there who it's going to work for. Your job is to find them. But it is a good strategy in terms of getting you onto the property ladder, into the property market, and it works incredibly well, especially once you work out the nuances and you've got a good legal advisor or a solicitor who can assist you with really good lease option agreements. So that's 10 strategies covered so far, and there's more to come. If you like the video so far, don't forget to click subscribe so you get notified every time a new video comes out. Post a comment sharing your experiences, but also if you have any questions, ask the questions, I'll happily answer them. And if I can't answer them, by the way, there are other people obviously who are part of this YouTube channel and other subscribers, they'll happily share their input with you. So what's not to like?